Today, social housing's impossible mission. Hi again, it's Martin North from Digital Finance Analytics. Well, that is post covering finance and problem news with a distinctively Australian flavour. Well, over the recent years, governments across Australia have reduced social housing considerably, to the point where many people who require housing help are either provided with very limited financial support, not enough necessarily to rent, or indeed are being forced into Airbnb or just bed and breakfast type accommodation. It's a national scandal, unfortunately, and it's a manifestation of the neoliberal view that you should just leave it to the markets. But the question, of course, is there an alternative path? Well, my perspective has always been that housing is a right, not a privilege. And that means that essentially we need financial structures and mechanisms, and that includes both at federal and state level, to enable people to find somewhere to live. So I'm always interested when new schemes are cooked up, and one has been cooked up by the Victorian government, and it's called a social housing contribution. Victoria is set to bring in social housing contributions. The state will introduce a new social and affordable housing contribution on certain developments from July 2024, it's been announced. The Andrews government has announced that from July 2024, all newly built developments of 3 dwellings or more, or 3 or more residential lot subdivisions will need to contribute 1.75% of the market value of the completed project to the Social Housing Growth Fund. All funds raised will be transferred to the Social Housing Growth Fund and allocated through a grants process to community housing agencies to deliver social housing projects. In order to bring in the new cash contribution payable on eligible planning permits from 1 July 2024 onwards, the Victorian Government is proposing amendments to the Planning and Environmental Act of 1987. Legislation to support the measure is yet to be passed by Parliament. If passed, the tax will apply to all local government areas in metropolitan Melbourne, as well as the regional cities of Greater Geelong, Ballarat and Greater Bendigo. Individual councils will reportedly determine how they accommodate the rate reform. However, it is expected that payment will be required prior to the issuing of a building permit for developments or prior to the issuing of a statement of compliance for a subdivision. According to the Victorian Government's estimates, the change will affect less than 30% of all residential planning permits, but will raise about $800 million a year over the first 10 years. And it's estimated that it will fund the delivery of up to 1,700 new social and affordable homes a year to create an average of more than 7,200 direct and indirect jobs per year. The new contribution is being brought in to help deliver a stronger and more sustainable social and affordable housing sector, while creating thousands of jobs and putting a roof over the head of people who need it most, they said. As well as bringing in the new tax, Minister for Housing Richard Wynne announced that the government will exempt social housing properties from paying rates. The rates reform will be phased in over 4 years from July 2023 and will only apply to social housing properties, but not affordable housing properties. The $54 million currently spent on public housing rates will reportedly be reinvested back into public housing maintenance and upgrade works, delivering kitchen and bathroom upgrades and better open spaces. Community housing providers will also reinvest $11 million back into the services they provide. Speaking of the changes, Mr Wynne said that the game-changing initiatives complement the state government's $5.3 billion big housing build and will help provide a secure and ongoing funding stream for social and affordable housing. Our landmark big housing build is changing lives, putting a roof over the head of people in need and creating jobs, but we'll need to continue building more homes beyond 2024, and these reforms deliver exactly that, he said. We're establishing a stable funding stream to provide the dignity of housing to thousands more Victorians now and into the future, while locking in social and economic benefits for years to come. Treasurer Tim Pallas added, access to safe, affordable and energy-efficient social housing benefits all Victorians. These changes will add further momentum to the delivery of social housing across the state. While several social housing groups have welcomed the proposal, there have been concerns raised that the new tax would cost first home buyers more. Michael Sukkar, the Federal Assistant Treasurer and Minister for Housing, Homelessness, Social and Community Housing, said this latest tax increase would punish first home buyers and restrict the supply of housing. Make no mistake, this is a tax on first home buyers that will make it harder and more expensive for Victorians who are trying to get into the housing market. Sukkar said, not only will this latest tax hurt first home buyers, but it will also put downward pressure on housing supply in Victoria and push up housing prices. We are seeing the results of Victorian Labor's poor financial management of their budget. First home buyers should not be penalised for decades of chronic underinvestment in social housing by the Victorian government. The Federal Labor Party needs to urgently condemn yet more housing taxes by their state counterparts. If Anthony Albanese is serious about cost of living pressures and helping Victorians into their first home, he needs to publicly denounce this new tax hike. Labor's refusal to denounce new taxes on first home buyers is damning and is further evidence that higher taxes are in Labor's DNA at both the state and federal level, he said. And he outlined that the new contribution is the 10th new property-based tax the Victorian government has introduced, following the Windfall Games Tax, the WGT, announced in December 2021. Together, Mr Sukkar suggests that they would add an additional $63,000 to the cost of a new home in Geelong, excluding other Victorian taxes, fees and charges. Elsewhere, the Housing Institute of Australia also said that the new tax would be another hit to housing affordability for all Victorians. And Fiona Neild, HIA's Executive Director from Victoria, said the cost of new homes after July 2024 will increase with this tax being passed through in the land prices for all new lots in these areas. Victorian home buyers already pay a range of taxes when they buy a new home, contributing half of Victoria's tax revenue now. In Melbourne, 38% of new home build is made up of taxes, fees and charges. This new tax will see land and house prices being pushed further out of reach of many new home buyers. Ultimately, it is new home buyers who will lose out, as the taxes must be passed on in higher land and house prices. So the HEA suggests that the new contribution would add over $6,600 to the cost of land for new homes. Add stamp duty and GST, along with many other costs, and this tax could cost more than $20,000 for a new home buyer, adding to their mortgage repayments, it added. Funding for social and community housing is a critical role of government, but this is a community need, and the response should be an equitable one. It simply doesn't make sense to suggest that making houses for those who can afford to buy a new house cost more is the right solution to support those who can't afford to buy one. This tax will perversely make the problem of affordability for all Victorians worse, not better, Ms Neild said. The government should be funding social housing from general rates and taxes, as well as working in partnership with the housing industry and the community housing sector to identify feasible and effective actions to support the delivery of long-term solutions for public housing needs. The government must stop shifting the burden of funding social and community infrastructure onto the select group of Victorians each year that choose to buy a new home. This tax is inequitable and unfair. And I do think they have something of a point here, insofar that this is another example of the market being forced to bend even more. And I've said on several occasions, the problem is we don't have a free market in any case. The trouble is that without significant direct investment from state, and indeed I would say federal government, because I do think they have a role to play here, it's going to be very hard to meet the massive demand that there is for social housing. And of course the federal government can conveniently say, well, social housing is a state problem. So once again, we see the issues of state and federal in stark contrast, which allows Sukkar to throw bricks without offering any real solutions. Now, elsewhere, just before I finish, according to Domain's most recent fortnightly property report, Melbourne, Sydney, Brisbane and Perth have all listed more properties this time than a year ago. In particular, New South Wales and Victoria's capitals have witnessed a huge spike in listings in just a fortnight, up 24% and 21% respectively. Dr. Nicola Powell, Domain's Chief of Research and Economics, believes the substantial increase in listings is due to several factors. This could be because sellers are being strategic with their market timing and listing homes for sale while selling conditions remain strong, she said. Some may also be timing a sale before interest rates rise or further macroprudential measures are put in place. And Dr. Powell added that the increased supply of listed homes would benefit potential purchasers still waiting to enter the property market. This increase in new listings is good news for hopeful property buyers. More properties for sale means more choice for buyers and, crucially, less competition, Dr. Powell said. Of course, she doesn't mention the fact that with increased supply, prices will slide. The increase in listings has been coupled with new data that shows Sydney and Melbourne are also witnessing a drop-off in views per listing year over year, which is another indicator of decreased buyer competition. Adelaide similarly saw a drop-off on annual views per listing, but only by a marginal 1%. But Queensland's capital city has witnessed a massive surge in annual views per listing. Brisbane's property sector has been experiencing considerable gains in views per listing year on year, with Domain's data showing a spike of 43%. This figure further solidifies the notion that interstate migration to the Sunshine State over the past 12 months has been profound. The news of increased listings across the country comes as Domain also recorded a finalised combined clearance rate at last week's auctions of 74.5%, although others will calculate that number significantly different and lower. The strong clearance rate further demonstrates that demand across the nation's property sector, they say, is still performing well, despite increased speculation that interest rate rises could be just around the corner. Well, to my mind, the rise in the number of listings is a very significant leading indicator of property price falls ahead, particularly in the major markets of Sydney and Melbourne. I'll discuss this once again with Edwin Almeida when we meet up for our Monday evening property rant. Tonight, as you know, we track the listing numbers each week. But this does seem to me to considerably underscore this shift in the market, with more properties coming on, less views per listing, and property price falls ahead. Now, if you're buying your home in Sydney's contentious market, you don't need to stand alone. This is the time you need to have Edwin Almeida from Ribbon Property Consultants standing alongside you. Buying a property is both challenging and adversarial. The vendor has a professional on their side. Emotions run high, price discovery and price transparency are hard to find, and then there's the wasted time and financial investments that you make. Edwin understands your needs, so why not engage a licensed professional to stand alongside you? With RPC, you know you have experience, knowledge, and master negotiators looking after your best interests. So shoot Ribbon an email at info@ribbonproperty.com.au, and if you use the promo code DFAWTW/Martin, you can get a 10% discount offer. I'm Martin North from Digital Finance Analytics. Many thanks for watching, and I'll see you again next time.